There's a secret that Quincy Jones once revealed in an interview that shocked the world. Ray Charles, the blind legend who moved millions with his music, wasn't actually blind. Jones claimed Ray could cross streets, shop at supermarkets, and count his own change without help. But here's the real mystery nobody talks about. There was one woman whose voice Ray Charles admitted could never be touched. Not by Aretha Franklin, not by Gladys Knight, not by anyone. Her name was Margie Hendricks, and if you've never heard of her, that's exactly the tragedy we're about to uncover. This is the story of the woman who gave Ray Charles his signature sound, bore his child, shared his addiction, and died forgotten while he became immortal. If you love uncovering hidden legends like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Legends Underrated, because this story will change how you hear every Ray Charles song forever. Picture a young girl in Statesboro, Georgia, standing before her church congregation in 1950. Margie Hendricks was only 15 years old, but when she opened her mouth to sing, grown men wept. Her voice wasn't just beautiful, it was something else entirely. Witnesses described it as a powerful, church-like sound that gave you chills the moment it hit your ears. It wasn't smooth or polished like the pop singers of the day. It was raw, aching, filled with the kind of pain and joy that could only come from someone who'd lived through both heaven and hell. By the time she was a teenager, she was directing that church choir, her fingers dancing across piano keys with the kind of grace that seemed impossible for someone so young. She was writing her own songs at 18, pouring her soul onto paper in ways that would later change the trajectory of American music. But Statesboro was too small for a voice that big, so Margie made a decision that would alter her life forever. She packed her bags and moved to New York City with her older sister Lula, determined to take singing lessons and chase a dream that felt as distant as the stars. New York in the 1950s was unforgiving, especially for a black woman trying to break into the music industry. But Margie had something nobody else had, a voice that could make you believe in God even if you'd stopped praying years ago. Margie's break came when she signed with Lamp Records, recording with Jesse Stone, a producer who was working with a girl group called The Cookies. In 1954, as a solo artist, she released 2 singles, Good Treatment and Every Time. They barely made a ripple on the charts, but they were good enough to keep her signed, good enough to keep the dream alive. Meanwhile, the Cookies had moved over to Atlantic Records and were making serious waves. But drama erupted when one of the members had a falling out with Jesse Stone. Stone's solution? Replace her with Margie Hendricks. Just like that, Margie was in. And once she joined, everything changed. The Cookies began singing background for the biggest names at Atlantic Records, Laverne Baker, Chuck Willis, Ruth Brown. They toured with groups like the Cadillacs, and suddenly everybody wanted to work with them. Why? Because of Margie's unique singing style and that powerful voice that could cut through any arrangement like a knife through silk. They were in such high demand that they couldn't even release their own songs. They were too busy making everyone else sound legendary. But then another falling out happened with Jesse Stone, and this time he walked away entirely. The Cookies were left without a producer, floating in limbo, unsure of what came next. That's when fate intervened in the form of a man who would change Margie's life in ways she could never have imagined. Ray Charles had just signed with Atlantic Records and was already making noise. Songs like I've Got a Woman, later sampled by Kanye West in Gold Digger, were climbing the charts. Ray was a genius, no question, but he was also a man ruled by 3 addictions: music, drugs, and women. There was a joke on the road that if you wanted to be in Ray Charles's band, you had to sleep with him first. It wasn't really a joke. At the time, Ray was working with a female vocalist named Marianne Fisher. They were doing duets together, and naturally they were having an affair. But then one night, Ray heard Margie and the Cookies singing. He stopped in his tracks. That voice, he had to have it. He asked them to work with him, and once they agreed, Ray Charles changed their name to the Raylettes and took them on the road. The moment Ray mixed Margie's gospel-soaked voice with his blues, jazz, and country sound, something magical and controversial happened. He was blending the sacred with the secular, taking the voice of the church and pairing it with the grit of the blues. The church community was furious, calling it blasphemy, but audiences couldn't get enough. Everybody wanted to see Ray Charles perform, and he was suddenly in high demand, making more money than he'd ever dreamed. Ray made Margie the lead singer of the Raylettes because she wasn't like the other girls. She was feisty, tomboyish, and didn't take any disrespect. They nicknamed her Henry because she was bisexual, and Ray found that intriguing. But there was another reason he spent so much time with her. according to Ray's autobiography, Brother Ray, Margie had a hard time learning her harmony parts, which required long hours of one-on-one work. The more time they spent together, the closer they became. And then, inevitably, they became lovers. Ray was married at the time. He was also sleeping with other women on the road, but Margie became his obsession. Marianne Fisher, his first singer and lover, was pushed aside. She stayed around for a while, trying to hold on, but eventually she got tired of the sex, the drugs, and the mistreatment. She left and went back home. Now it was just Margie and Ray, bound together by music and something far more dangerous: heroin. Ray was hooked on heroin badly, and Margie became hooked too. They started getting high together, spiraling deeper into addiction. Ray later claimed he wasn't the one who turned her on to it, but the truth is they fed each other's demons. In 1958, Ray Charles released a live album titled Ray Charles at Newport, recorded at the Newport Jazz Festival in Rhode Island. One of the songs from that album became legendary: "Nighttime is the Right Time." It reached number 5 on the Billboard R&B charts and number 95 on the pop charts. But more importantly, it showcased Margie's powerhouse voice in a way that couldn't be ignored. When she screamed "baby" in that song, it wasn't just singing, it was exorcism. It was every ounce of pain, love, and longing she'd ever felt, poured into a single word. If you've ever seen that episode of The Cosby Show where Rudy sings that part at the grandparents' anniversary, that's Margie's legacy echoing through time. Around this time, Margie became pregnant with Ray's child. They talked it over, and despite Ray being married, Margie decided not to get an abortion. Ray agreed to support the child, and on October 1st, 1959, Margie gave birth to their son and named him Charles Wayne. Ray made a promise to Margie's sister Lula that he would take care of his son and pay the bills. But Ray had to get back on the road, so he did what he always did. He moved on. He replaced Margie temporarily with another singer named Mae Mosley, and naturally, he started having an affair with her too. The hits kept coming. Hit the Road Jack reached number 1 on the R&B charts for 5 weeks and number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 2 weeks. It won a Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording. Then came What Did I Say, which reached number 1 on the Billboard R&B Singles Chart and number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving Ray his first gold record and becoming Atlantic Records' best-selling song at the time. Ray Charles was on top of the world, but Margie was back in New York raising their son alone. Ray would stop by for dinner if he was in town, but Margie could feel the truth settling in her bones. She was being replaced. She knew the pattern. She'd seen it happen to Marianne Fisher, and now it was happening to her. Ray would eventually move on, just like he always did, but Margie stayed. She continued doing shows with Ray because she needed the money, and other record labels were showing interest in signing her as a solo artist. By this time, Ray had started his own label, Tangerine Records, and was ready to put out a Raylettes album. In 1964, the Raylettes released a single called Love Us Blues, with Margie on lead and Ray on piano. But while on the road, Ray continued his relationships with other women, and Margie's jealousy turned into rage. She started drinking heavily, picking fights, starting arguments. The drinking made her reckless, and then she made the mistake that would end everything. Stories like these are why I built Legends Underrated, so make sure to subscribe for more untold tales. Margie started having an affair with one of Ray's trumpet players. Now, Ray had one sacred rule that everyone in the band knew. Nobody could date his girls once he'd had them. It didn't matter that he was sleeping with different women all the time. His girls were off limits to everyone else. When he found out about the affair, that was it. Ray fired Margie from the group, ending their 6-year relationship in a single cold decision. Margie was devastated, but she wasn't done fighting. She signed a record deal with Mercury Records, working with producer Gene Bowlegs Miller, who'd done work with Otis Redding and Etta James. As a solo artist, she released her first 2 singles in 1965, Now and It Hurts Me Too. 2 years later, in 1967, she released Restless, Nothing But a Heartache, and One Room Paradise. But none of it mattered. Her solo career wasn't taking off the way she'd dreamed. The singles gained little to no attention, and the silence was deafening. Without the success, without Ray, without the spotlight, Margie turned to the only things that made the pain go away: drugs and alcohol. On September 7, 1967, while driving in Texas, Margie was seriously injured when her car was hit by a truck carrying lumber. She sustained neck injuries and slight hearing loss in her right ear, which put her out of work completely. No work meant no money, and no money meant no way to survive in an industry that had already forgotten her name. Life spiraled downward fast. The alcohol and drugs took over entirely, and Margie couldn't kick the addiction no matter how hard she tried. She was drowning, and there was nobody left to pull her out. On July 14, 1973, Margie Hendricks died of a heroin overdose. She was only 38 years old. The woman whose voice Ray Charles said could never be touched was gone, erased from history, her name barely a footnote in the story of the man she'd helped make legendary. Fast forward to 2004. The movie Ray was released, starring Jamie Foxx in an Oscar-winning performance. The film became a box office hit, grossing over $100 million. Regina King played Margie Hendricks, and she admitted in an interview that there wasn't much information available about Margie when she was preparing for the role. She had to rely on Margie's voice to guide her. Even Hollywood couldn't find the story of the woman who'd changed American music. Ray Charles died of liver disease just months before the movie premiered, but his legacy was cemented forever. During his lifetime, Ray fathered 12 children with 10 different women. At a family luncheon in 2002, he gave 10 of his 12 children each a check for $1 million. The other two couldn't make it to the luncheon, but there was a clause attached to that money, a cruel and telling condition. The child had to be working and not on drugs in order to receive the inheritance. Margie and Ray's son, Charles Wayne, was incarcerated at the time the movie was being made and released. He was 38 years old, the same age his mother was when she died. He never got his $1 million. He was left behind, just like his mother, a casualty of a system that celebrated genius but punished the broken. So here's what we're left with: a woman whose voice revolutionized music, who inspired Ray Charles to create the sound that made him immortal, who bore his child and shared his darkest addictions, died alone and forgotten while the world celebrated the man she helped build. Margie Hendricks never got her movie. She never got her $1 million. She didn't even get her name remembered. The irony is brutal. Ray's other children received wealth and recognition, but Margie's son was locked away, unable to claim what should have been his birthright. And Margie herself, she's a ghost in the history of American music, a voice that echoes through Ray Charles's greatest hits but never gets credited, never gets honored. It makes you wonder how many other legends are out there, forgotten and erased, their contributions stolen by the men who used them and moved on. We remember Ray Charles. We celebrate his genius. But do we remember the woman who gave him his sound? Do we remember Margie Hendricks, the voice that could never be touched? This twist shocked the world, and if you never want to miss stories like this, subscribe to Legends Underrated today. Let me ask you this: how many other hidden legends are we forgetting while we celebrate the names everyone knows? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over.